From ashes to armada, the mining outpost on Caldera VI was a vision of industrial hell. Massive refineries belched toxic yellow clouds into the already poisoned atmosphere, while transport ships constantly arrived to haul away the precious elutrium ore that powered the Valerian Empire's vast fleets. In the shadow of these monstrous structures, thousands of humans toiled, their lives measured only by production quotas. Commander Lyra Kessler watched the scene from a ridge overlooking the main processing facility, her face partially hidden by a rebreather mask. 20 years ago, she had been an officer in Earth's defense forces. Now she was just another shadow in the resistance, one of the few who still remembered what freedom felt like. "Transmission incoming," whispered Tarek, her communications specialist. The young man had never seen Earth, born in captivity, raised in servitude. Yet he fought for a home world he knew only from stories. Lyra activated her neural implant, allowing the encrypted message to filter directly into her consciousness. The data came in pulses, bypassing the Valerian surveillance systems that constantly monitored conventional communications. "They've increased the processing quotas again," she said after the transmission completed. 3 more workers died yesterday from toxin exposure." Tarek's jaw tightened. "My sister works in that sector." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's why we're here. That's why we fight." The Valerians had appeared in Earth's orbit 50 years ago, their biomechanical ships blotting out the sun in major cities worldwide. The initial invasion had been swift and brutal. Earth's military might, impressive by human standards, had proven hopelessly outmatched against a species that had conquered a dozen star systems before turning their compound eyes toward humanity's home. Yet in their conquest, the Valerians made a critical error. They didn't exterminate humanity. They enslaved it. Humans were adaptable, resilient, and when pushed to the edge of extinction, dangerously innovative. The Valerians saw only a workforce. They failed to recognize an enemy being forged in the fires of oppression. Movement at the facility's main gate caught Lyra's attention. A massive Valerian overseer, its exoskeleton gleaming with bio-augmentations, was dragging a human worker into the central plaza. Even from this distance, Lyra could see the worker's face was bloodied. "Public punishment," Tarek muttered, his voice tight with rage. Through her binoculars, Lyra watched as the overseer activated its neural disruptor, preparing to make an example of the worker. But just before the device discharged, another human, a woman, broke from the gathered crowd and hurled herself at the overseer. It was suicide, of course. The woman was dead in seconds, her body crumpling beside the first worker. But her action created just enough chaos for something unexpected to happen. The remaining workers, instead of cowering, surged forward as one. The overseer disappeared under a wave of humanity. "That wasn't planned," Lyra said, already activating her emergency beacon. "But it might be exactly what we needed." Within hours, the uprising at Caldera VI had been brutally suppressed by Valerian enforcers. Dozens of humans were executed, hundreds more reassigned to even more dangerous mining operations, deep beneath the planet's surface. By conventional metrics, it was a devastating defeat for any nascent human resistance. But Lyra Kessler saw something different. She saw the spark. 3 months later, on the frozen research outpost of Europa Station, Dr. Elias Chen worked feverishly in his laboratory. To the Valerian administrators who occasionally inspected the facility, he was conducting research on improving crystalline power conductors. Valuable work that justified the resources allocated to his lab. In reality, he was building something far more significant. "Progress report," Lyra said, stepping through the hidden entrance to his actual workspace. Elias gestured toward a holographic display showing molecular structures that constantly shifted and reconfigured. "The adaptive nanites are functioning beyond expectations. They can now reconfigure standard materials at the quantum level." "Meaning?" Lyra asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Meaning we can transform mining equipment into weapons, agricultural drones into fighters, and communication arrays into something the Valerians can't even comprehend. A rare smile crossed his face. Their own technology turned against them. This was the foundation of Lyra's grand strategy. For years, her network of resistance cells had been gathering information, recruiting specialists, and establishing hidden supply lines between colonies. What began as isolated acts of sabotage had evolved into something far more dangerous, a coordinated galaxy-spanning insurrection. The Valerians had spread their empire too thin, relying on automated systems and a relatively small number of overseers to control vast numbers of humans. They never imagined that the factory workers building their ships could subtly alter the designs, that the technicians maintaining their communication networks could create hidden backdoors, or that the scientists developing their weapons could deliberately leave exploitable weaknesses. 6 months after the Caldera VI incident, Lyra stood in the command center of Sanctuary, a massive asteroid that had been hollowed out and hidden in the debris field of a destroyed moon. Around her, dozens of humans monitored communications, coordinated supply movements, and directed the activities of resistance cells across 12 star systems. "We've received confirmation from Proxima Colony," reported Maya Santos, Lyra's second-in-command. "The prototype was successfully tested. The Valerian patrol never detected it, even at close range." Lyra nodded. "And the manufacturing facilities on Artemis IV. Production exceeds projections. The neural interface systems are being distributed to all major cells." Maya hesitated. "There's something else. Our deep cover operative on Volaris Prime has sent a data packet. I think you need to see this." The information came from the heart of the Valerian Empire, historical records that had never been shared with conquered species. As Lyra processed the data, her expression shifted from concentration to shock. "They'd done this before," she whispered. 7 other species, all enslaved, all eventually worked to extinction. "We're just another resource to be consumed," Maya said. "When we're used up, they'll find another world, another species." Lyra stared at the projection showing the Valerian expansion over centuries. "No, we're going to break the cycle. Humanity won't be just another footnote in their history." The discovery accelerated their timeline. What might have been years of preparation compressed into months of feverish activity. The Resistance's greatest advantage was that the Valerians fundamentally misunderstood human psychology. They believed that sufficient punishment would ensure compliance, never grasping that each act of cruelty only strengthened humanity's resolve. In hidden shipyards throughout the Empire, humanity's fleet took shape. The vessels weren't large, nothing that would trigger Valerian sensors designed to detect capital ships. Instead, they were small, stealthy, and incorporated technology that the Valerians would consider impossible. The key breakthrough came from Dr. Chen's team on Europa Station. They had discovered that the crystalline structures the Valerians used for faster-than-light communications could be modified to create quantum entanglement on a scale never before achieved. This allowed human ships to coordinate perfectly without detectable communications. They would appear to be acting independently while executing a unified strategy. 1 year after the Caldera VI uprising, Lyra stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the first completed vessel of humanity's hidden fleet. Unlike the massive biomechanical monstrosities of the Valerian Navy, the Defiance was sleek, elegant in its efficiency. Every system had been designed with a single purpose: to exploit the weaknesses in Valerian technology that only humans, working within those systems for decades, could have discovered. "Final systems check complete," reported the ship's pilot, the young woman who had been an agricultural drone operator just months earlier. "All functions nominal." Lyra nodded, surveying the bridge crew. Each face reflected the same determination, the same controlled anger. They were miners, technicians, scientists, ordinary people transformed by extraordinary circumstances into the vanguard of humanity's liberation. "The Valerians believe they've broken us," Lyra said, her voice carrying across the command deck. "They think we're resigned to our fate, that we'll continue to work and die for their empire, until there's nothing left of us. Today, we show them how wrong they are. As the Defiance prepared for its first mission, a Valerian security cruiser was already investigating unusual energy signatures near a minor mining outpost. The Empire had begun to notice discrepancies, missing resources, unexplained power fluctuations, workers disappearing from their assigned posts. High Commander Vexillor stood on the bridge of his flagship, his compound eyes scanning multiple data feeds simultaneously. Something wasn't right. The patterns were subtle, but unmistakable to one who had overseen the subjugation of multiple species. Increase surveillance on all human sectors, he ordered. Implement Security Protocol Omega-3. The officer beside him hesitated. That would require diverting significant resources from the expansion efforts in the Cygnus Arm. The Reckoning. The Valerian supply convoy moved through space with arrogant confidence. 6 massive cargo haulers, filled with processed ore and manufactured components, traveled under the protection of a single light cruiser. In 50 years of Imperial rule, no human resistance had ever managed to threaten a Valerian military vessel. That certainty was about to be shattered. Commander Lyra Kessler watched from the bridge of the Defiance as 5 additional human vessels moved into position, each one invisible to Valerian sensors. The quantum entanglement communication system allowed her fleet to coordinate with perfect precision without transmitting a single detectable signal. "All ships report ready," Maya said from the tactical station. "Targeting solutions locked." Lyra took a deep breath. This moment, the beginning of humanity's true resistance, had been years in the making. There would be no going back. "Execute," she ordered. The attack happened with devastating efficiency. The human vessels didn't appear on Valerian sensors until the moment they fired, and by then it was too late. The escort cruiser's engines were the first target, disabled by weapons specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities in Valerian shield harmonics. The cargo ships, slow and unmaneuverable, never had a chance to escape. Within minutes, the entire convoy was dead in space. No distress signals had been sent. As far as the Empire was concerned, these ships had simply vanished. "Boarding teams report all Valerian personnel neutralized," Maya announced. "The cargo vessels are ours." Lyra nodded. "Begin resource transfer according to Plan Beta. I want these ships stripped and our people clear within 2 hours." The cargo, especially the rare metals and advanced components, would feed the growing human resistance. But more valuable than the material goods was the psychological victory. For the first time, humans had successfully attacked and defeated Valerian forces. And this was just the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, similar strikes occurred throughout the Empire. Supply convoys disappeared. Communication relays failed. Automated defense platforms went dark. Each incident appeared isolated, a random malfunction or navigational hazard. None were traced back to human resistance. On Volaris Prime, the Imperial capital, High Commander Vexillor stood before the Supreme Council, his exoskeletal armor clicking softly as he shifted positions. "These are not coincidences," he insisted. "The patterns indicate coordinated action across multiple sectors. The humans are responsible." Councillor Zexura's mandibles twitched in what passed for amusement among their species. "You attribute too much capability to these primitives. Their military was dismantled generations ago. Their leaders executed or assimilated. What remains is a labor force, nothing more." Vexillor's compound eyes narrowed. "A labor force with intimate knowledge of our systems, our schedules, our vulnerabilities. We have allowed them to maintain their intelligence, their creativity, believing we could harness these qualities for our benefit. That was a mistake." Before the council could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber, a serious breach of protocol that instantly silenced all conversation. "Forgive the interruption," the aide said, her exoskeleton vibrating with stress. "We've lost contact with the Nexus Array." The impact of this news rippled visibly through the council. The Nexus Array was the central hub of the Empire's faster-than-light communication network. Without it, Coordination between star systems would be reduced to light-speed transmissions, effectively cutting the Empire into isolated segments. When? Demanded Vexillar. 4 standard minutes ago, all 14 relay stations went offline simultaneously. In the uncomfortable silence that followed, Vexillar turned back to the Council. Still believe these are random malfunctions. The Valerian response was swift and brutal. Martial law was declared across all human settlements. Production quotas were doubled, with harsh punishments for any shortfall. Surveillance increased to unprecedented levels. Thousands of humans suspected of harboring rebellious thoughts were publicly executed as examples. It was exactly what Lyra had anticipated. They're pulling forces from the outer systems to reinforce their core worlds, she explained to her command staff, gathered in Sanctuary's strategic center. They're operating on the assumption that we're still a conventional threat, that we need to gather large forces to pose any danger. Aren't we? Asked Admiral Jensen, a former Earth military officer who had been in stasis during the initial invasion, awakened only years later by the resistance. Not in the way they understand warfare. Lyra gestured to the holographic display showing Valerian fleet movements. Their entire strategic doctrine is based on overwhelming force projection. She touched a control, and the display shifted to show the intricate network of Valerian communication, power, and logistical systems. For 50 years, they've integrated humans into every aspect of their empire. We maintain their ships, operate their communications, process their resources, and for 50 years, we've been learning, adapting, and preparing. The next phase of Lyra's plan was already in motion. Throughout the Empire, seemingly loyal human workers were activating dormant programs, making subtle adjustments to critical systems, and preparing for a synchronized action that would demonstrate just how vulnerable the mighty Valerian Empire truly was. On the Valerian throne world of Sanctus II, High Sovereign Sex Miller received the latest reports with growing concern. Half of the Empire's communication network was now non-functional. Supply chains were breaking down. Military vessels were reporting navigation system failures. The empire that had stood for millennia was suddenly showing signs of systemic collapse. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. How can primitive humans cause such disruption when our most sophisticated security systems detect no large-scale military activity? High Commander Vexillar, summoned from the front lines, stepped forward. Because we fundamentally misunderstood our enemy. We saw them as a conventional threat to be countered with ships and weapons, but they turned our own empire against us. Every system we built, every network we created, has become a weapon in their hands. As if to punctuate his point, the lights in the Imperial Palace flickered and died. Emergency systems activated, bathing the throne room in an eerie red glow. What now? The High Sovereign asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. They're coming, Vexillar replied. The human fleet appeared in orbit around Sanctus II without warning. 40 vessels of varying sizes, each one incorporating technology that should have been beyond human capability. The Valerian defense grid, the most powerful in the Empire, should have annihilated them instantly. Instead, the defense platforms turned their weapons on the Valerian ships in orbit. They've compromised our automated systems, reported a frantic tactical officer. We're losing control of our own defenses. On the bridge of the Defiance, now expanded and upgraded into a proper flagship, Lyra watched as the battle unfolded according to plan. The Valerians were scrambling to counter an attack they had never imagined possible, not just from the weapons arrayed against them, but from their own systems. The palace defenses are down, Maya reported. Ground teams are moving into position. Lyra nodded. Prepare my shuttle. Some battles needed to be fought in person. The Imperial Palace of Sanctus II had never been breached in the 1,000-year history of the Valerian Empire. Its architecture was a testament to their belief in their own invulnerability. Massive biomechanical structures that soared toward the sky, protected by energy fields and automated weapon systems. Now those same defenses were silent, the great doors standing open as Lyra Kessler and her strike team moved through ornate hallways. Occasionally, they encountered Valerian guards, but these were quickly neutralized. The Empire's warriors, accustomed to overwhelming force advantages, were ill-prepared for the guerrilla tactics employed by humans who had spent years planning this very assault. In the central throne chamber, High Sovereign Zex Miller waited with his royal guard. High Commander Vexilar stood at his side, neural disruptor ready. "So this is the architect of our humiliation," the High Sovereign said as Lyra entered. "A single human female." "Not just me," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the tension vibrating through her body. "Every human you've enslaved, every world you've conquered, every life you've destroyed. We all did this. I'm just the one who gets to deliver the message." Vexilar stepped forward. "And what message is that, human?" "That your empire ends today." The ensuing battle was brief but intense. The royal guards were elite warriors, and Vexilar himself was a veteran of countless conflicts. But Lyra's team had the advantage of surprise, superior coordination through their neural interfaces, and the righteous fury of a species fighting for its freedom. When it ended, Lyra stood over the wounded form of High Sovereign Zex Miller, her plasma pistol aimed at his central nerve cluster. "You could have coexisted with us," she said. "You could have traded, formed alliances. Instead, you chose enslavement and exploitation." The Sovereign's compound eyes fixed on her. "You would have done the same, given our power. It is the nature of dominant species." Lyra shook her head. "That's where you're wrong, and that's why you lost." Throughout the Empire, the tide had turned decisively. Valerian ships found themselves unable to navigate, their weapon systems locked down by hidden programming. Communication networks broadcast the news of the central government's collapse. Defense systems designed to protect Valerian worlds now prevented their fleets from approaching. In a matter of days, an empire that had stood for millennia found itself unable to function. Not destroyed by superior firepower, but systematically dismantled by the very beings they had thought too primitive to pose a threat. 1 month after the fall of Sanctus II, representatives from across the former empire gathered on a neutral space station to determine the new galactic order. The Valerians, stripped of their military might, sent delegates who could scarcely comprehend how completely their world had changed. Lyra, now recognized as the de facto leader of liberated humanity, addressed the gathering. "We don't seek to replace one empire with another," she declared. "Each species, each world has the right to self-determination. What we establish today is not a new hierarchy, but a community of equals." In the years that followed, humanity helped establish a new interstellar coalition. The technological innovations born from resistance became the foundation for unprecedented cooperation and advancement. The Valerians, after generations of imperial arrogance, found themselves learning painful lessons about coexistence. As for Lyra Kessler, she eventually returned to Earth, helping to rebuild the homeworld that had been systematically exploited for half a century. Standing on a hillside overlooking the recovering landscape of what had once been North America, she reflected on the journey that had brought humanity from the brink of extinction to a position of influence in the galaxy. The Valerians had made a fatal error. They had seen humans only as resources to be used and discarded. They never understood that oppression doesn't break a species like humanity. It transforms them, forges them into something more dangerous than any empire could imagine. The stars above no longer represented distant masters, but possibilities, a future where humanity's greatest strengths would not be used for vengeance, but for creation. Retroclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.